So we're all here today at the App Promotion Summit because we know how important mobile is. So it's kind of obvious. If you haven't read these reports that are here on this slide, I highly recommend that you do because they're very interesting. But although this might be obvious to us, and it has been obvious for a while, it hasn't been obvious to everybody. A lot of people are still waking up to the fact that mobile apps are really important, but the fact is they are all waking up to it. So everybody's going to crash our mobile app party. Historically, we've seen so far 2 waves of people getting into mobile apps. And what we're going to see more and more is everybody getting into it. What I mean by this is, if you thought this space was heated up already, get ready for it to be even more heated. Which means we need to be very well prepared to fight for those mobile app users. My partner Diego has presented before at the App Promotion Summit here in Berlin and in London. I don't know how many. Can you raise hands if you've seen him present here before? Okay, so I'm sorry to disappoint all of you. I'm not half as funny as he is. But for those that like to have a good laugh and want to see the basics of mobile app marketing, including acquisition and retargeting, I highly suggest that you actually go on YouTube and watch his presentations. I also happen to be Brazilian, so I'm not going to make any funny comments about the World Cup. Because all I have to say is thank you, Germany, for a very well-deserved humble pie. So when we look at what we've done over the last 3 years, and 3 years in mobile app years is more than dog years, what we've seen is when people get into this space, it's almost like they had a board meeting, and in the board meeting they said, okay, we need to get into mobile. Why are we doing mobile? Okay, let's launch an app. Let's just get a bunch of users for our app. And then they start just getting desperate for installs, okay? Then what happens is, okay, let's stop and see what happened. Let's improve the app. Let's look at the ROI. What's actually happening inside the app? Oh, we don't know. Okay, let's make sure the tracking is there. And then they start doing a bit more acquisition, looking at what's actually happening. And then as they get more mature, they actually start trying to scale while keeping quality and making sure that they know their ROI and that their ROI makes sense. Obviously, the more you just want installs, the less technology you need, and the more you're looking at in-app activity, the more technology you need, which is also why there are a lot more players just offering installs and less players in this market offering actual technology for in-app optimization. I absolutely hate self-promotion, so I didn't put our logo in there. But I guess you know where we are. So with a lot of people getting into this space, and a lot of people getting into this space just looking for installs, everybody's bargaining on CPI, which is a big mistake for the simple main reason that an install does not equal a user. And that's one thing that, if there's one thing I want you to take out of this presentation today, is that. Okay, so the alarming things I've been seeing people do, in terms of clients in general, they're doing paid acquisition and buying mobile advertising. They're assessing results way too quickly, which means within 2-3 days, if a campaign isn't converting in certain ways, they just want to pause it. Within a week or 2, they think that they already know what's happening and they want to stop it, not giving it time. Most of the time, they're either not tracking the right KPIs or they're reluctant to actually send that data along. If you're not tracking what's happening inside your app when you're doing acquisition, you're throwing money into a black hole. You literally don't know what's happening with it. And if you don't give us the postbacks on those events, then you're basically hoping that we're going to optimize campaigns based on telepathy or something. You really need to have that data and make sure you feed that data back so that technology can feed on data. And a lot of them are just focusing on CPI, especially when they get started, because that's what you pay. You pay on per install, but what you really should look at is what happened after the install and how much you're paying for an active user and how much you're getting return on your investment. So the right way would basically be allow longer time windows for the results to show. Just as it takes you time to know the real lifetime value of a mobile app user, it does take time for it to optimize in terms of paid acquisition. It takes data to feed the engine, and it takes time to collect the data. Because it takes data to feed the engine over time, you must again make sure you have the right postbacks being sent on the right events. And you must be tracking the right events. You must be looking at your cost per whatever it is you care about. And that can change over time. You could start saying, I want registrations, that's important for me now. Okay, cost per registration. And then later it could be transaction that's important. And so it goes. So I'm going to give you a few examples to prove those points of a few clients we've had. And this data might be interesting for some of you, might already kind of sound familiar, some of you might be surprising. So starting with a taxi app in London, as you know, there are a lot of taxi apps in London. So it's a heated space, it's very competitive. The client needs to win the users right now before other people do. So they want to scale, but obviously you don't want to just get installs, you want to get active users. So over the course of 20 weeks, we worked with this, and the case study is over the course of 20 weeks, but it's ongoing. To try and get more scale and installs, you obviously increase in the CPI. That's how you're going to get more people, right? Okay, so that worked. That's a pretty simple rule. How did that actually impact the conversions? So the conversion in this case, it's the cost per first ride. So how does that first trip convert? Once we increase CPI, as you can see, it actually drops a bit the conversion. Why? Because you're adding a new variable to the mix of data that we're collecting, right? So we're tapping into more sources because we have a higher CPI to play with. So we can buy from more sources, which means more sources to come in and analyze. Once we're analyzing them at the beginning, we don't know how they're converting, so obviously the conversions goes down a bit. But within a week of 4 or 5 weeks, and as you can see, it's 4 to 5 weeks that it takes for it to go up again. So those conversions do go up again, even though they drop, because the technology feeds on that data and it does get smarter with it. And what that actually meant for this client is that although they almost tripled the CPI over the course of 20 weeks, they actually dropped their CPA by half. So the cost per first trip dropped by half. Okay, but this is a pretty simple app in the sense that it's mobile only. The conversion window between install and the actual first trip is not that long, and it's in London. That's a pretty mature market. So let's look at a more complex one. Let's go to the opposite spectrum, which is travel app in Latin America. Travel is a very difficult space because first, a user could install an app, use it, but only convert on the desktop, actually purchase on desktop, and it's hard to cross-device. And second, they could take months between the install and actual purchase. And Latin America is very famous for having very poor conversions, which is why we picked that as an example for you today. So these clients, for example, wanted to scale like they all do. Over the course of 30 weeks, so after a few weeks, what we said to them is, listen, if you're only looking at the cost per transaction, then the only event we have is when people actually purchase, but they could be purchasing on desktop, or it could take months. It takes too long to optimize. So let's look at other things. So they added other events to the tracking, or they sent us new post specs around hotel search, around registrations and reopens, which already show quality. So instead of our technology thinking either good user or bad user in terms of only installed or made a purchase, now we knew, okay, there's bad user because never does anything against with the app, or there's people that do hotel search and that reopen and there are better users. So we started scaling a bit. Once they wanted to actually scale in terms of volume, that's when we played with the CPIs and we increased them. And over those 30 weeks, we managed to get these results across Latin America in terms of in-app conversion for hotel search. And these results are great in general, but in Latin America, they are amazeballs because it's really hard to get there. But it does take time. 30 weeks is almost like a pregnancy. It's like a baby. And this baby, for those who don't believe in Android, is an Android baby. So you are able to actually optimize and get there on Android and in difficult markets if you just allow time and you allow data for it. So speaking of babies, this is probably the most famous baby in the history of tech conferences. I promise I'm not going to use him again because I saw Marie use them earlier as well. But so trying to show you this level of scale we can get on this. This is an e-commerce app, and I didn't bother showing you where the CPI increases were on this because by now you probably realize on those little peaks, that's where they happen. And the event rate. So this is India and this is Brazil. These people are actually able to get almost 40,000 or 60,000 installs a week now on an event rate that went up so well that even though, so basically what happened is we about doubled the number of installs and we more than tripled their conversion rate. And this happens again because we allow time and we allow trade to drop before it can increase again. It's not a straight line. It's never a straight curve. And if a client says, tries to try and optimize that manually, it gets in the way of allowing that to happen. So it takes time and it takes playing with the CPI and focusing on the right things with the right length. So how does that actually work? So you've got all these different sources in mobile. I'm sure you all know because you have to work with all these different players, and so do we. So we're aggregating from over 150 different ad networks and RTB exchanges. The more you play with CPI, the more you allow the CPI to increase, the more sources you actually allow us to add to the mix. Once you have a lot of sources, having the right postbacks, so basically tracking the right things and sending postbacks to players like us to optimize for you, means that our technology can get smart. It can get smart about this impression on this device, on this operating system, at this time of day, in this location, with this banner on this publisher, works. It's a good one. It actually brings a good user. It doesn't mean to say that a publisher is good or bad. A sub-publisher is not necessarily good or bad. It could be good at a certain time of day, in a certain place, on a certain device, with a certain operator, and so it goes, and it's a lot of different variables. So technology allows us to optimize it much better than if we just look ourselves at the publisher level. So this is how it goes in terms of you're paying on the install, but that whole engine is helping you optimize CPA, which is what you care about. And basically, so that's what we do. Jamp is a company headquartered in London and Argentina with offices in San Francisco, New York, Sao Paulo, Cape Town, where I'm based. And we're open in Berlin. So if I want you to remember one thing today as well, is that we're hiring in Berlin. And we're a cool company with headquarters in Cape Town and Argentina and London, etc., that I already mentioned. And if you know great talent, we're always looking for talent, so please remember that for us. These are some of the clients. I also want to ask Joff from our team to get up, whatever he is. Joff? Oh, shame. Okay, so the guy who's not in the room, you can talk to him or to me later, and we can answer any questions you might have on the company and what we do. Thank you.